Hi, folks. I'm Gabriel. What I'm going to tell you happened just over 3 years back, and it stuck with me like a nightmare I can't shake. I've always seen myself as a seasoned adventurer in the wild, raised on camping trips, trail walks, and wandering through nature's rough spots. I could follow paths, spot wildlife signs, and manage just fine in remote areas. I'd logged endless weekends amid the trees of Washington state, never once feeling uneasy. The forest was my retreat, a spot to ditch the chaos and pressures of daily routine. But everything shifted during a solo trek in the secluded woods up north in Washington. It was the tail end of September with ideal conditions that week. The summer warmth had eased off, giving way to that fresh fall chill. Foliage was beginning to shift hues, and I was eager to hit the paths before the downpours kicked in. I'd picked an obscure route snaking through thick pine groves, about 2 hours' drive north from Seattle. The path stretched around 8 miles, forming a circuit through some of the area's purest, least disturbed terrain. I'd trekked there once years earlier and recalled its serene, solitary vibe. That's precisely the kind of escape I craved. I pulled up to the starting point near 9 a.m. The lot was empty, which fit for this off-the-beaten-path spot. It didn't show up on popular guide sites, and word-of-mouth locals guarded it closely. I slung on my light pack, stocked with water, snacks, a basic med kit, and my cell. Figured I'd wrap up in 5 or 6 hours. No need for overnight stuff. I secured my vehicle, inhaled the sharp highland breeze, and set off along the route. The opening stretch delivered exactly as expected. The woods buzzed with avian calls, wind-swayed foliage, and the soft murmur of a nearby stream. The way was kept up nicely but saw little foot traffic, lending it that raw, pristine edge. Rays pierced the overhead branches, casting spotted lights across the ground. I paused at a couple of viewpoints to snap pics and soak in the sweeping drop to the valley. It all seemed ideal, maybe even suspiciously so. Roughly 4 miles in, an odd shift hit. The woodland fell utterly quiet. Initially, I dismissed it as my mind playing tricks. Yet as I pressed on, the hush grew undeniable. No bird calls, no bug hums, no stirrings in the bushes. It was like all life had evaporated in an instant. I halted, froze in place, and strained to listen. All that reached me was my own breath and the subtle grit underfoot from my steps. With my trail time, I knew such stillness often signaled trouble, a hunter prowling close or weather brewing. I glanced upward. Sky was spotless, no gusts, nothing hinting at trouble ahead. I kept moving, but unease clung like damp fog. That's when the prints caught my eye. They marked a soggy patch where a minor brook had spilled over. From afar, they resembled bare human feet sunk in the earth. But crouching for a better look, I saw they didn't add up. The gaps between steps stretched impossibly, 6 or 7 feet at least. The sinks pointed to a weight far beyond human, perhaps 250 pounds or heavier. The digits stretched out, claw-tipped almost, with a slim, plunging heel. Nothing in my experience matched this. I struggled to make sense of the prints before me. Perhaps it was some bear on its hind legs or a big buck leaving an unusual mark. Yet in my gut, I realized that wasn't true. These impressions were intentional, aimed with purpose, and leading right along my route. I grabbed my phone to snap a shot, but the display showed no bars. Not unexpected in this isolated spot, though it heightened my sense of solitude. Rising to my feet, I surveyed the surroundings, peering into the woods. No motion anywhere. The scene remained utterly quiet. I pressed on, regardless. I reassured myself I was being paranoid, that it was likely some wildlife, and my mind was playing tricks. Yet as I advanced, a sensation of being observed crept in. It's tough to describe, but it felt like an unrelenting weight at the nape of my neck, an ancient urge warning me of company. Now and then, I'd spot a flash in the corner of my eye, something ghostly slipping amid the trunks. I'd halt and peer back, only to find emptiness, merely darkness and limbs rustling in the breeze. Next came the respiration. It was deep and rough, akin to a person heaving after a sprint. The noise emanated from my left, farther into the thicket. I froze in place and shouted, inquiring if somebody was nearby. My words reverberated among the branches, met with silence, except for that steady pulsing inhale. I quickened my steps, pulse racing wildly. The respiration trailed after. It lingered beyond view, consistently on my left, shadowing the path exactly. I attempted to dismiss it as gusts or a beast huffing through the brush. But the rhythm was too precise, too unwavering. It synced flawlessly with mine. As I moved, so did the sound. When I paused, it ceased. I accelerated, nearly running. My pack thumped against my back, perspiration forming on my brow even in the chill. The respiration matched me without fail, neither lagging nor advancing. It seemed as if the presence was teasing, signaling its nearness while staying hidden. Suddenly, footfalls echoed. They were weighty and measured, grinding leaves and breaking twigs. Now the noise shifted behind me, straight along the path instead of alongside. I whirled about, fingers fumbling for the blade at my waist. Yet the path stretched bare. I lingered briefly, panting heavily, gaze darting over trunks and gloom. Then it appeared. Roughly 30 yards distant, smack in the trail's center, loomed a silhouette, towering impossibly, over 7 feet tall, possibly taller. Its form was ghostly white, nearly see-through, like flesh untouched by light. Limbs stretched excessively, arms dangling below the knees, legs slender and frail. What chilled me most was its posture. Joints twisted at bizarre angles as if suspended by unseen wires like a marionette. And the visage, if it qualified as one, was featureless. No sockets, no bridge, no lips, merely taut, ashen hide over skull. We faced off, or rather, I gawked at it. Whether it perceived me was unclear, but its consciousness of my presence was certain. The atmosphere near it wavered, like summer haze over hot asphalt. That harsh, moist breath persisted, yet the entity ahead remained still. No heave in its torso. The source lay elsewhere, unseen. Slowly it cocked its head sideways, as if appraising me. Panic seized me then. I fled. No deliberation, no strategy. I simply pivoted and dashed along the trail with all my strength. I sensed it pursuing through the woods, not following the path, but mirroring it, bulldozing the foliage. A quick look back revealed it weaving among the trees, not striding, but traversing in an unnatural glide. Its appendages scarcely stirred, yet it effortlessly kept stride. I veered off the path. Path markers meant nothing now, Escape was all that mattered. I plunged into the woods, limbs lashing my cheeks and limbs, my chest seared, my muscles ached fiercely, but I pushed forward. The respiration grew nearer, more intense. A root tripped me. I tumbled violently, crashing to earth. The jolt expelled my breath. For an instant, I sprawled there, wheezing. Flipping onto my back, I gazed upward. It hovered above, mere feet distant, every aspect sharpened in view. The flesh wasn't merely fair, it bore a web of slender, shadowy vessels throbbing in unison. Its claws stretched out long and skeletal, tipped with what appeared to be dark, jagged ends. Though it lacked any features on its head, I sensed its gaze fixed on me, examining every detail. I clawed my way back through the underbrush, fingers sinking into the soil and fallen foliage. Then came a sound etched forever in my memory, a deep, rumbling click, echoing from somewhere within its torso. It wasn't speech or anything familiar, yet it carried intent, as if attempting to convey a message. Somehow, I hauled myself upright and bolted once more, veering off in another direction this time. I pushed on until my limbs failed me, unable to manage even one more stride. When I halted at last, I found myself on a maintenance path. I crumpled against the rough stones, heaving breaths, my frame trembling uncontrollably. Glancing back at the woods, I saw no pursuit emerging. The tree line stood motionless and hushed, as if the incident had never occurred. I lingered there for what seemed an endless stretch, until my pulse finally slowed. At length, I rose and trudged along the path. My vehicle waited roughly a mile distant, and I kept going without pause until I reached it. My quivering fingers struggled with the keys before unlocking the door. I barricaded myself in and remained seated, eyes locked on the woodland beyond the glass. A portion of me anticipated that entity stepping from the shadows, but it never appeared. The drive back was wordless, thoughts swirling with uncertainties. What exactly was that creature? Did it truly exist? Or was it merely a delusion from fatigue or thirst? Deep down, though, I recognized the truth of what I'd witnessed and sensed. That being was genuine, and it had pursued me. Even now, I remain unsure of what lurked in those trees that day. I've devoted countless hours to investigations, scouring obscure archives and accounts of bizarre encounters across the Pacific Northwest. Folks have proposed it could be a rake, a skinwalker, or tied to tales of the Fresno nightcrawler, yet none align perfectly with my vision. Clearly, it wasn't humanoid, nor any beast from known wildlife. A couple of weeks on, I consulted a park official in search of clarity, describing the prints and the silhouette I'd spotted. He heard me out with courtesy, but his skepticism was evident. Quote 0, he remarked. Quote 1. Yet I stand firm on what transpired. That presence was authentic. I've steered clear of that path ever since, and have no intention of returning. I still venture into the outdoors, but always with company and far from such seclusion. These days, I'm constantly vigilant about my environment, ears attuned and eyes scanning, aware that whatever it was persists somewhere in the wilds. I never wish to cross paths with it again. Undeniably, the memory of its eerie motion and poised stare haunts me. Should you ever trek solo and the woods fall eerily quiet, heed your gut. Flee. For the unexplained often harbors our deepest terrors. I'm Riley, and the events I'm sharing unfolded in the summer of 2021, a nightmare that still disrupts my sleep. I've long cherished outdoor adventures and immersing myself in the wild. There's a serene escape in unplugging from gadgets and the bustle of daily existence, simply cohabiting with the untamed. My buddies and I had anticipated this getaway for ages, ultimately picking a secluded pond up in northern Minnesota. We envisioned an ideal escape. 3 days filled with dips in the water, angling, and evenings by the flames swapping tales. No one foresaw the horror awaiting us. The spot we selected was stunning yet utterly remote, far from any crowded hotspots in guidebooks. Locals whispered about this secret haven nestled deep in the timber. The closest settlement lay some 40 miles off, reached via bumpy dirt tracks riddled with craters. Our journey dragged on for ages, the vehicle rattling over the rugged ground. We pulled up to the pond late Friday afternoon, discovering we had it all to ourselves. The surface gleamed transparently, mirroring the azure heavens and the thick woods encircling it completely. No signal on our phones, no fellow visitors, just our group and the raw surroundings. We pitched our site that Friday on the eastern bank, in a modest open area ideal for our shelters and an existing stone ring for the blaze left by past visitors. With Addison, Marcus, and Jenna all seasoned in the outdoors, we erected the setups and kindled the flames swiftly, under an hour's time. As dusk approached, we were already plunging into the pond, giggling and playing like children. The chill was brisk but invigorating, and the whole scene felt idyllic. The next day, Saturday, proved even more enjoyable. We rose with the dawn and passed the morning hours casting lines into the water. Marcus reeled in a solid bass, which we grilled right there on the flames for our midday meal. Later, we launched the kayaks we'd packed along and explored the lake by paddle. Spanning roughly 2 miles at its broadest, it was hemmed in by dense woods on every side. Not a single home, pier, or trace of human life dotted the area. It was as if the whole planet belonged just to us. As dusk fell on that Saturday, we kindled a fresh blaze and began toasting marshmallows over it. The heavens were unclouded, with stars emerging one by one. It was the kind of idyllic instant you hope never ends. Then, near 10 p.m., the mood shifted dramatically. Addison sat opposite me, gazing at the lake, when she fell silent and gestured toward the surface. She claimed she'd spotted motion out there, something massive. We initially brushed it aside with chuckles. Marcus quipped that it was likely a fish or drifting timber, but soon enough we caught sight of it ourselves. A disturbance sliced through the water in a straight, intentional path. The lake had remained utterly calm that night. No breeze, no swells, yet this disturbance advanced purposefully. It bore straight for our beach. We leaped to our feet, snatching flashlights from the tents. Jenna swept her beam over the water, and briefly we discerned nothing. The light skipped along the ripples, mirroring back from the subtle undulations. Then, some 50 yards offshore, an object emerged. It burst upward with a sharp splash, startling us into retreat. Initially, I figured it could be a seal or perhaps an otter, but that seemed impossible. This was an inland lake up in northern Minnesota, far removed from any sea. No matter what it was, it didn't belong. The entity submerged once more, leaving the surface serene again. We lingered motionless, beams fixed on the breach point. A heavy pause hung over us without words. Then came the noise, a deep, rumbling emanation rising from below. It was utterly foreign to my ears, resembling a snarl yet laced with a machined quality, steady and throbbing. The resonance pulsed through the atmosphere, thrumming in my torso. Addison insisted we bolt right away, urging us to gather our things and head to civilization despite the total darkness and treacherous nighttime paths. Marcus attempted to soothe her, suggesting it was merely a hefty fish or beaver, though his tremor betrayed his fear. He kept glancing back at the lake. Jenna proposed shifting our shelters deeper into the woods, away from the edge. We concurred and hauled our equipment inland over the following 20 minutes. We restoked the fire in a more secluded spot and endeavored to assure one another that all was well, but clearly it wasn't. Near midnight, splashing roused me from sleep. I eased open my tent's zipper without a sound and squinted toward the shore. The moon hung almost full, bathing the water in ghostly illumination. At the water's brink, perhaps 30 feet from our sight, loomed a shape. For a second, I assumed it was a companion, Marcus or Jenna out for a midnight stroll. But the outline was too immense, too towering. It stooped low, soaked through, its form etched sharply against the lunar glow. The build was distorted. Limbs and trunk defied normal ratios. The body stretched slender and extended, with appendages that kinked at unnatural angles as if boasting additional hinges. The skull was bizarrely formed, stretched out, cocked as though straining to detect a noise. I stifled my breathing, paralyzed by dread. I longed to rouse the group, to cry out, but immobility gripped me. I simply observed. The silhouette advanced on our setup, advancing in sluggish, calculated strides that jerked awkwardly. Each footfall brought the moist, sucking slosh of liquid shedding from it. It halted roughly 20 feet from my shelter, beside the dying coals of our fire. The faint red glow danced over its hide. That's when details sharpened. The exterior gleamed shadowy and glossy, like a lizard's, sheathed in what appeared to be plating or sodden leather. The appendages dangled to knee level, terminating in extended finned digits. It swiveled its face my way. Whether it detected me visually or otherwise, I sensed its focus. It canted its head the opposite direction. And then the noise returned. That profound, throaty rumble originating from its core. This iteration boomed louder, fiercer. The tremor coursed through my frame. My pulse hammered fiercely, threatening to rupture free. I breathed Addison's name in a hush. Her campsite was positioned directly beside my own, and the thin material of her shelter revealed her outline in the dim light. She was up, propped in a sitting position, and it was clear she had spotted the figure just like I had. Silently, the two of us observed as the creature lingered there, fixated on our sight. Suddenly, it pivoted and headed back in the direction of the lake. Its steps were abrupt and oddly mechanical, just like before. Upon arriving at the edge, it plunged into the depths without a single splash. The surface hardly stirred as it vanished below. I slipped out from my sleeping area and roused Marcus and Jenna. I described the encounter to them, and Addison backed up every detail. Initially, Marcus dismissed it, insisting we must have been imagining things or mistaking it for a bear. Jenna, however, appeared utterly frightened. She admitted to noticing odd noises prowling the perimeter earlier that evening, though she'd dismissed them as typical wildlife. Huddled around the fading embers of our campfire, none of us dared return to our beds. Each noise, every whisper from the foliage, sent us into a panic. We kept our beams trained on the lake's edge, braced for its return. By about 3 a.m., we resolved to break camp and depart immediately. The hazardous unlit paths didn't matter anymore. We simply had to escape. We hastily stuffed our belongings into the vehicle, skipping any neat packing of shelters or supplies. Escape was all that mattered. While securing the final items, I glanced once more at the water. It lay utterly calm, yet I couldn't dispel the sensation of eyes upon us, as if that entity remained hidden just under the waves, observing. The journey home was pure dread. Total darkness enveloped the route, limiting our view to mere yards ahead. Shadows and overhanging branches seemed like impending dangers. Silence gripped the car throughout. We were all too rattled and worn out to talk. Spotting the glow of a roadside station upon hitting the primary road brought a wave of relief. Dawn had barely broken when we were already miles from the site. Pulling into a roadside eatery, we attempted to make sense of the ordeal. Marcus offered logical explanations, suggesting it was likely a big creature like a moose or bear out for a swim. But deep down, I knew that wasn't accurate. Whatever emerged wasn't any ordinary animal. It was different, unnatural, impossible. Over the ensuing years, I've hunted for explanations. Online searches for comparable incidents in northern Minnesota yield scant results. Occasional ancient tales of aquatic beasts, fleeting accounts from indigenous traditions, but no solid evidence. A year on, I revisited the region, not the lake proper, but the closest settlement, inquiring if locals had witnessed anomalies. Most reacted with mockery or odd stares. Yet an elderly fellow at a fish and supply store shared a detail that sent shivers through me. He explained the lake had long been shunned by residents, with generational whispers of an inhabitant in its depths. He clammed up beyond that, but his gaze conveyed conviction. Even now, the nature of our sighting eludes me. An unknown life form, perhaps? A being concealed in that isolated body for ages untold, or something beyond rational thought. I've delved into cryptozoological myths and global water creature lore, yet none align precisely with our experience. Undeniably, it existed and scrutinized us. That lake is off limits for me forever. I'll avoid such isolated outings altogether. These days, any stretch of water, particularly after dark, sparks unease about hidden watchers below. If you're ever isolated by a secluded pond and notice unnatural motion within, heed your gut. Depart swiftly. Don't linger to investigate. Certain mysteries thrive in obscurity. Rest assured, that lake's resident endures. I pray no one else endures our nightmare. The tale I'm sharing unfolded when I was 16, and its memory lingers persistently. I was raised in a modest community in eastern Kentucky, hugging the Appalachian foothills. Our household cherished outdoor excursions, venturing into the peaks from my earliest years. The wilderness always seemed secure, even welcoming. Father instructed me in wildlife trailing, flame-starting techniques, and celestial wayfinding. I believed myself fully versed in woodland secrets. How mistaken I was. The incident occurred in summer 2018. My folks arranged a brief rental of a modest lodge far into the ridges for quality family time. It involved only us, Mom, Dad, my little sibling Tyler, and myself. The cabin sat roughly 3 hours' drive from our home, tucked away in a deeply secluded stretch of the mountains. The closest town lay nearly 20 miles off, and the route to it twisted along little more than a rugged dirt track cutting through thick woods. By the time we pulled up, the afternoon had faded, with the sun sinking low behind the peaks. The place was modest, yet inviting. 2 bedrooms, a compact kitchen, and a living area centered around a sturdy stone hearth. A wooden porch stretched out front, facing the woodland expanse that stretched unbroken for miles. The breeze carried scents of pine and damp soil, broken only by the trill of birds and the whisper of wind in the foliage. It felt serene, perhaps eerily so. That first night, Dad kindled a fire in the hearth while Mom prepared our meal. Tyler and I wandered the nearby grounds. It all seemed routine, like any ordinary family getaway. Come the second evening, Tyler and I opted to camp out in a tent rather than bunk inside. We craved the authentic outdoor thrill, dozing beneath the open sky, attuned to the night's woodland murmurs. Our parents balked initially, but relented in the end. We pitched the tent some 50 yards from the cabin, in a modest glade ringed by trees. Dad pitched in to set things up, double-checking our flashlights and phones before heading back indoors with Mom. Tyler and I lingered awake a while, chatting and gazing at the stars, visible through the tent's screened roof. Near midnight, sleep finally claimed us. I jolted awake for no clear reason. Glancing at my phone, I noted it was just past 2 a.m. Tyler slumbered beside me, his snores faint and steady. I paused, straining to hear. Initially, nothing seemed amiss, just the familiar nocturnal rustles of the woods. Then came Mom's voice, uttering my name in a frantic pitch. It echoed from the cabin's direction, laced with unmistakable dread. I shook Tyler until he stirred, urging him to investigate with me. He grumbled sleepily, rubbing his eyes. But the urgency in my tone snapped him alert. We tuned in again, and there she was, summoning us both repeatedly by name. Yet it rang false, her words strained, as if forced through some barrier garbled at the edges. I eased open the tent flap and peered out toward the cabin. No lights glowed within, no signs of stir. Then Dad's voice cut in, but not from there. From farther off, swallowed by the denser trees. He was hailing Mom, demanding her whereabouts. Tyler's grip tightened on my arm, nails biting in. He breathed that this wasn't right. Both parents ought to be safe inside. I hushed him, and we waited. The calls persisted. Mom beckoning us, Dad seeking her. But the longer I focused, the clearer the horror grew. They mimicked too closely, yet missed the mark. The inflections skewed, the cadence off-kilter, like crude parodies of our family's tones. Then my own voice joined the chorus, drifting from the tent's left side, invoking Tyler's name. But I hadn't spoken. I sat silent right there, lips sealed. Tyler whimpered, and I muffled him with my palm. We huddled motionless in the tent, terror rooting us as the voices swirled nearer, Mom's, Dad's, mine, all distorted, all insistent. They drew in through the encircling trees, accompanied now by footfalls. Heavy crunches on fallen leaves, sharp cracks of branches. Even those didn't fit. Too ponderous, too calculated, as if some entity aped human steps without mastering the subtlety. I resolved we had to bolt for the cabin. Tyler resisted, paralyzed by fear, but I hauled him to his feet. Fumbling the zipper silently, we slipped out into the inky blackness of the woods. Our flashlights pierced weakly, casting the shadows into sharper, more threatening forms. The cabin loomed dark ahead. I couldn't tell if my parents sensed the peril or even stirred. We dashed forward, my fingers locked around Tyler's, dragging him in my wake. The voices swelled, no longer feigning alarm but turning harsh and commanding. Mom's, whatever it was, shrieking my name with fury. Deep down I knew it wasn't her. We'd made it only halfway to the cabin when a noise caught my ear from behind. I stole a quick look back and spotted a silhouette at the clearing's edge, right by our tent. It loomed enormous, unreal in height, perhaps 7 or 8 feet, and its frame was gaunt and stretched out, with arms dangling in odd, unnatural ways. The shadows hid its face, but I watched its jaws working. That's when my own voice echoed from it again, urging Tyler to quit fleeing. I let out a piercing shriek. I can't recall the words, if there were any, just raw, desperate noise. Tyler wept uncontrollably, tripping over roots as we bolted. Bursting into the cabin, I hammered on the door with my knuckles, shouting for my parents to open up. It swung wide, and Dad stood there, bewildered and frightened. He yanked us in and bolted it shut. I blurted out everything, the sounds, the sight. He dismissed it at first, figuring our nerves had tricked us into mistaking a coyote's howl or an owl's hoot for something worse. But then it came. Mom's voice, clear as day, summoning from just beyond the walls. Yet Mom was right beside us in the living room, eyes locked on the door in terror. The call repeated, beckoning Dad outside by name. It matched her perfectly, but it wasn't her. Dad crept to the window, eased the curtain aside. He froze there, gaze fixed on the black night. Finally, he dropped the fabric and retreated, his complexion ashen, fingers trembling. He ordered us clear of all windows and doors. He secured every lock, inspected each pane, then killed the interior lights to keep us hidden from whatever lurked. We clustered in the living room, crouched on the floor, spines pressed to the sofa. The voices droned on through the hours of darkness. One at a time, or overlapping in a chorus, they'd shift around the perimeter, hailing from various angles. Once, my voice murmured directly outside my spot by the window, murmuring gibberish laced with our names. Tyler buried sobs in Mom's embrace, while Dad gripped a hunting knife, eyes glued to the entryway. Time dragged on forever, each tick feeling eternal. Any rustle sent us flinching. The cabin's groans made us freeze mid-breath. Later, thuds echoed overhead, deliberate, ponderous steps pacing the roof, followed by rasps as if talons scraped over the tiles. Exhaustion and dread must have overwhelmed me. I don't recall drifting off. Morning light poured in when I stirred, and Dad was already loading the car. No words, just a nod to collect our stuff. We crammed it all in hastily, ignoring neatness or order. Escape was all that mattered. Glancing at the abandoned tent in the clearing, I heard Dad say we'd leave it. A replacement would do. The ride back passed in utter quiet. No one dared revisit the horror. Tyler clung to my hand from the rear seat the whole way. Mom twisted constantly, scanning for pursuers. Home at last, Dad extracted our vow of silence. No sharing the ordeal. Folks would label us unhinged, he warned. They'd never grasp it. I nodded, though the memory clings. Over the years, I've delved into explanations. Cryptids, regional myths, Appalachian tales. Some point to the Wendigo, a Native American spirit that echoes human speech. Others float skinwalkers, those transformative beings from tribal lore. But none align precisely with our terror. That presence was cunning. It observed, absorbed our tones, wielded them to unsettle. It stalked us deliberately. The worst part? Its nearness. Had we lingered in the tent, delayed our dash, what then? Entry, abduction? Unthinkable, and I'd rather not dwell. One truth lingers. Those peaks harbor something unnatural, enduring in the wilds. My family shuns that cabin forever. No more Appalachian outings, no retained gear, it's all discarded. The topic stays buried. Still, it haunts me endlessly. Those flawless imitations piercing the gloom, that shape at the tree line with lips forming my pleas. How many others have caught such eerie calls amid the trees? How many people have crossed paths with that creature and survived to share the tale? If you're ever out camping in some isolated spot and hear a familiar voice calling your name, someone close to you, don't answer until you've laid eyes on them and confirmed it's really who you think. Because the entities lurking in the shadows can mimic the voices of your loved ones with eerie precision. And once you figure out it's a deception, it could already be too late. I'll never shake the memory of hearing my own voice echoing from the trees, summoning my brother. I'll never erase the image of how that thing slinked around our cabin through the night. No matter what it was, it sure wasn't human. And I pray I never run into it again. I'm Lily, and what I'm sharing with you went down roughly 5 years back. It's the kind of experience that still sends shivers through me whenever I'm driving solo after dark. Back then, I was 22, just graduated from college and starting my first full-time gig in Des Moines, in Iowa. My high school bestie, Sarah, was living in a little town about 2 hours distant, and we'd make it a habit to catch up at least monthly, taking turns with the road trip. That late October evening, I'd hung out all day at her house and was heading homeward. I rolled out around 11 p.m. She suggested crashing there, but with an early shift looming the next day, I didn't fancy rising at 5 a.m. for the commute. 2 hours behind the wheel seemed manageable. I'd done it plenty before. Normally, I'd stick to the main highway, but construction that night funneled me onto winding backcountry routes via detour markers. No big deal, I thought. Iowa's rural paths are simple enough. Endless ribbons of asphalt slicing through vast expanses of corn and soy fields. I queued up tunes, got comfy, and hit the gas. The initial half hour passed without incident. The roadway was deserted. No vehicles coming or going. Illumination was scarce, just my beams cutting the black, plus the faint glow of far-off farmhouses. Flanking the pavement, the fields loomed shadowy, their corn long since reaped, reduced to jagged remnants. With my window slightly ajar, the crisp fall breeze carried scents of soil and wood smoke from remote hearths. That's when it appeared. Initially, I pegged it for a scarecrow or perhaps a farmer idling in the crop rows. It stood off to the right, maybe 50 yards from the edge, utterly motionless. But drawing nearer, I clocked its height. It couldn't have been a scarecrow. It towered at least 7 or 8 feet, oriented straight toward the road and me. I eased off the accelerator on reflex, straining for a clearer view. That's when its eyes caught me. Luminous orbs bouncing back my headlight's glare like a beast caught in the beam, yet positioned impossibly elevated. No critter I recognized reached such stature, and its rigid bipedal stance, arms limp by its sides, screamed unnatural. A cold dread prickled my skin, and I floored it to pull away. In the mirror, it lingered, fixed on my retreat. My pulse hammered, though I rationalized it as an optical illusion, maybe machinery or a lofty stake my mind had twisted. But a mile later, another materialized. Over on the left, right at the field's brink, identical stature, pose, and those radiant eyes. I didn't break this go-around. Eyes forward, pedal down, though I stole a peek as I zipped by. It held fast, gaze unwavering. My grip trembled on the wheel, beads of sweat forming even in the chill. Then came more, one after the next. Every few hundred yards, another silhouette at the periphery, always roadward, alternating sides but uniform in form. Towering unnaturally, those eyes following my passage like silent wardens. I began tallying them mentally, a distraction from the rising fear. 5, 6, 7, 8. They dotted the route relentlessly, sentinel-like. I fumbled for my cell, craving any voice to ground me, but my quivering fingers sent it tumbling to the seat beside me. No time to retrieve it. I barreled on, stare fixed ahead, resisting the pull of those field watchers. Yet each one compelled a sidelong glance, confirming their vigilant stare. Until one stirred. Peripheral vision caught the motion, seizing my breath. It had posted in the right-hand field, and as I drew level, it advanced onto the asphalt. I glanced into my rearview mirror and spotted it right there in the center of the road behind my vehicle, its limbs dangling loosely by its sides. It didn't pursue me or sprint after the car. It simply remained motionless. Yet the mere fact that it had shifted position at all triggered a complete meltdown inside me. I stomped down on the accelerator, urging my vehicle beyond safe limits along those tight, winding country lanes. The needle on the speedometer rose to 60, then 70, and kept climbing to 80. Getting stopped by cops didn't matter to me. Crashing off the pavement didn't either. All I wanted was distance from whatever those entities were. Still, regardless of my velocity, another one always lurked ahead. They dotted the landscape everywhere, countless numbers of them positioned in the meadows, observing my passage. Once, I drove by a trio lined up side by side, all oriented toward the highway. Their gazes lit up simultaneously under the beam of my lights, and I could have sworn one cocked its head as if intrigued, as if examining me closely. A scream erupted from my lips, unbidden and laced with pure dread. I don't recall choosing to let it out. It poured forth, hoarse and frantic, until my voice grew raw. Abruptly, the nightmare halted. I traversed a modest bridge, and beyond it, the countryside lay barren. No silhouettes, no luminous stairs, zilch. Only vast expanses of farmland fading into the night. I pressed on for 10 more minutes until the tension eased enough for me to stop. Spotting a filling station at the outskirts of a nearby village, I eased into the lot, my fingers trembling uncontrollably. There I idled for nearly an hour, motor humming, locks secured, struggling to regain composure. At last, I dialed Sarah. I recounted the horrors I'd witnessed, and she absorbed it all in silence. After I wrapped up, a heavy pause hung between us. Finally, she proposed I was likely worn out, that exhaustion had conjured illusions in my brain. She recommended grabbing a cup of joe and crashing at an inn overnight. Part of me longed to accept her explanation, to convince myself it was all imagination, a vivid delusion or slumber intrusion. But deep down, I recognized the truth of what my eyes had captured. Those entities existed, and they'd been fixated on me. No inn for me that evening. I grabbed a big coffee from the station's counter and continued the journey home, opting for the broader interstate this time, despite the added half-hour detour. No further apparitions appeared. Upon arriving at my building, I lingered in the parking spot for 20 more minutes, vigilant for any pursuers. I realized the absurdity of it all, how unhinged it must seem, but caution demanded it. Sleep evaded me that night. I perched on the sofa amid blazing lights, eyes glued to the entrance, ears attuned to every unfamiliar creak. Dawn's arrival brought some relief, allowing me to exhale. I dragged myself to the office in a haze of fatigue, yet shared nothing with colleagues. They wouldn't buy it anyway. Frankly, even I questioned my own sanity. Over the ensuing days and months, I grappled with explanations for the sighting. Perhaps they were artistic displays, effigies crafted by a regional sculptor and scattered across the acreage. Or maybe practical aids, like reflective stakes for farming purposes. I scoured the internet for clues, but drew a blank. The idea of returning to that stretch by daylight to hunt for proof crossed my mind, though fear rooted me in place. Even under sunlight, revisiting the site filled me with horror. Since then, I've motored by countless pastoral expanses, and each instance has me peering at the peripheries, alert for those forms. None have re-emerged. Yet the unease persists. They're out there in the shadows. I sense it, poised and patient. On solitary nocturnal drives, a distant silhouette, a slender upright form in the terrain, will spike my pulse. But as I approach, it's invariably a post, a sapling, or mere illusion. To this moment, their nature eludes me. I've delved into tales of mysterious beings, elusive creatures, shadowy silhouettes, elongated specters, and assorted enigmas. Friends have floated theories of extraterrestrials, positing those radiant orbs as cutting-edge devices. Some posit a collective delusion, perhaps triggered by airborne toxins or tainted sustenance-inducing visions of the non-existent. None ring true to me. My encounter was tangible. Those presences were authentic, scrutinizing my every move. The true terror lies in the unknown purpose. What drew them to those meadows? Why monitor the thoroughfare? Were they anticipating an arrival or event? And should I have braked, exited the vehicle for a closer look? What fate awaited? I'll never seek that truth. I refuse to uncover it. Should you navigate Iowa's backcountry under cover of night and glimpse a lofty, immobile shape with luminous eyes amid the fields, keep moving. Resist the urge to halt or decelerate. Accelerate onward. Don't glance behind you or attempt to make sense of it, for certain mysteries aren't designed for comprehension. Others exist solely to inspire dread. One fact remains certain. I'll never again venture down a secluded country lane in rural Iowa after dark. And if you cherish your mental well-being, neither should you. I'm Wyatt, and the account I'm sharing unfolded 2 years back, during my solitary stay in a modest leased cottage on the edge of a remote Kentucky town. I'd relocated there for my job, and the spot suited me ideally, affordable, serene, and secluded. The structure dated back to the 1970s, perched on roughly an acre of property hemmed in by dense forest on 3 flanks. The closest resident lived nearly half a mile distant, a detail I welcomed. Privacy suited me after enduring tight urban rentals for years. This expanse felt indulgent. Initially, the opening weeks passed smoothly. I established a pattern: lengthy factory shifts, returning drained. I'd prepare a meal, catch some television, then retire. The dwelling emitted typical aged home sounds: groaning planks, shifting base, sporadic wood snaps from thermal shifts. It didn't faze me. I'd matured in a similar vintage home and anticipated such quirks. Roughly a month into my tenancy, shifts began. Late October brought chillier evenings. After a double shift, I arrived home near midnight, stationed my pickup in the drive, shouldered my pack, and approached the entrance. That's when the noise hit me. A subtle scraping, methodical, emanating from close by the building. I halted, straining to hear, assuming perhaps a raccoon or opossum rifling through garbage. The rasp persisted, steady and patterned, as if talons scraped steadily over timber. Circling to the house's flank, I swept my phone's beam along the foundation. Nothing visible, and the sound ceased upon my approach. Concluding the intruder had fled, I entered, secured the portal, and resolved to inspect the bins come dawn. Sleep eluded me, though. That noise replayed in my mind, intentional, goal-oriented. It resembled no foraging beast. It evoked an entity attempting entry. The following evening it recurred. Indoors already, lounging in the den, viewing shows, the scrape initiated near 10 p.m. from the pane aft the settee. I silenced the screen and attuned my ears. Now it rang sharper, fiercer. Rising, I drew aside the drape, directing my light outward. Initially, emptiness. Then motion at the wall's foot. A form huddled there, flush to the exterior. I rapped the glass, aiming to startle it off. That's when it tilted upward. No beast was this. A visage appeared, man-like, yet distorted. Pallid hide clung taut to skeletal frame, sockets void and obsidian. Jaws gaped, exposing ranks of discolored fangs. The frame stretched gaunt and protracted, like an overextended figure. It crouched quadrupedally, appendages kinked oddly, digits extended and skeletal, tipped with charred talons. Our gazes locked for an endless span until it unleashed a chill-inducing act. It grinned, not a mortal's expression, but a macabre, widening unveiling further those stained dentition. I reeled rearward, snagging on the low table. Regaining the sill, it had vanished. Trembling, pulse thundering, I labored to dismiss it as hallucination. Exhaustion's toll, perhaps. Optical illusions from gloom. Yet inwardly, I recognized the truth. That entity existed, intent on breaching my abode. Slumber evaded me that eve. Perched in the den amid full illumination, I patrolled panes and portals repeatedly. Each noise jolted me. Every structural groan suggested its return. Dawn's arrival brought relief, easing my breath. Venturing out, I examined the sighting's locale. Rain-softened soil revealed traces in the mire by the base, slender, extended streaks akin to claw trails in earth. Fresh gashes marred the cladding, profound incisions in the lumber. I skipped work, devoting the day to probing my vision. Hours online yielded cryptid images and anomalous tales. The nearest match? A crawler or rake. Reports differed in details, yet they consistently described a ghostly human-like figure that scuttled on hands and knees, boasting a disturbing look. Certain tales painted it as hostile, whereas others portrayed it merely as inquisitive. I couldn't say where my encounter fit, but I had zero interest in discovering that. On that evening, I double-checked every entry point, securing windows and doors tightly. For extra caution, I barricaded the entrances with heavy pieces of furniture. Shortly before midnight, the clawing resumed. Now, it echoed from overhead, right on the rooftop. The noise pulsed directly above my position, methodical and unhurried, shifting to and fro. Snatching a baseball bat from the wardrobe, I positioned myself centrally in the lounge, gaze fixed upward at the ceiling. The scraping dragged on for what seemed an eternity before ceasing. The ensuing quiet felt even more oppressive. Uncertainty gnawed at me. Was it gone, or merely biding its time? Next came sounds from the exterior wall. It resembled a descent, talons raking the outer panels. Edging toward the pane, I eased the drape aside slightly for a glimpse outdoors. There it hung, attached midway up the structure. Its skull swiveled in my direction. Our gazes locked once more, though this time, no grin appeared. Instead, it simply fixed on me, empty sockets piercing through. Abruptly, it released its hold, plummeting earthward and touching down quadrupedally. With eerie velocity, it dashed through the lawn and vanished amid the trees. No chance I'd linger to see a return. Scooping up keys, billfold, and mobile, I bolted. Headed to a buddy's place, I crashed there over the following trio of evenings. Upon sharing the ordeal eventually, he dismissed it as a prank at first. Realizing my earnestness, he urged contacting authorities. But how to explain? A bipedal entity prowling my property? They'd label me unhinged. Inevitably, return proved necessary. Indefinite freeloading wasn't viable, nor did alternatives exist. Arriving at the drive, the dwelling appeared unchanged, serene, mundane, innocuous. Entering, I inspected each space, verifying no intrusion. All appeared normal. That evening, illumination blazed while the bat rested bedside. No clawing recurred then or subsequently. Days turned to a week, then another, fostering hope that the ordeal had concluded. Perhaps the entity had relocated, seeking fresh territory to torment. I erred in that assumption. Roughly 3 weeks post the prior event, nocturnal awakening came via labored respiration. It emanated immediately beyond my sleeping quarters glass, wheezy and strained, akin to a labored inhale. Bolting upright, paralysis gripped me from dread. The inhalations persisted, followed by a deep, throaty clatter, reminiscent of skeletal friction. Seizing my device, I activated the beam, directing it toward the pane. Drapes concealed the view, yet a silhouette loomed against the transparency from without. It loomed elongated, exceeding expectations for a crouched posture. Thus, it stood erect. Ambiguity plagued me. Was this an improvement or escalation? The outline shifted, accompanied by renewed scraping, now upon the glass directly. In abject terror, I observed slender, elongated digits emerge along the fabric's border, attempting to part it. Shouting defiance, I demanded its retreat. The digits halted, the form evaporated. Vigil maintained through the remaining hours, eyelids refused to droop. Dawn revealed further gouges upon the surface. Whatever entity pursued me, tenacity defined it. 2 months hence, relocation ensued. Endurance waned against perpetual anxiety, insomniac vigils, the perpetual sensation of surveillance indoors. The property owner deemed lease termination premature madness, yet indifference ruled. Escape imperative. Relocating to another locale, securing fresh employment, I endeavored to consign the episode to oblivion. Reminiscences endure. Visions of that form adhered to the facade, hollow orbs scrutinizing mine. Recollections of the rasps, the gasps, the aberrant agility in motion. Rationalizations attempted, sightings dissected, yet coherence eludes. Certainty lingers, and presence dwelled in those thickets, intent on entry. Presently, isolation repulses me in habitats, proximity to others essential, illumined avenues, vehicular hum, urban clamor and solace, for awareness persists of the shadow's inhabitants, skulking through underbrush, quadrupedally advancing across terrain. Rekindle an acquaintance forbidden. Should solitude claim you in secluded environs and nocturnal scrapes assail panes or eaves, heed not dismissal. Shun attributions to wildlife, for oft it defies. At times, horrors exceed. Upon detection of your presence, upon visual affirmation, cessation impossible. It'll return every night without fail, either until you pack up and go or until it manages to slip inside. One memory that haunts me forever is that creature latched onto my home, peering in at me from the glass. No matter what it really was, it definitely wasn't human. It wasn't kind either, and I pray I'll never cross paths with it again. I'm Eleanor, and this story goes back to when I was 19, on a road trip with college buddies deep in the rural stretches of West Virginia. The summer of 2019 found us bound for a music festival a couple states away. We'd chosen the winding back roads through the countryside, figuring it'd beat the boredom of endless interstate miles. Little did we know the terror lurking ahead. Our group numbered 4 in the vehicle that afternoon. Jessica, my roommate, handled the wheel, while Marcus and Tara lounged in the rear. After roughly 6 hours of travel, cabin fever was setting in for all of us. The path had twisted sharper and squeezed tighter, flanked by heavy woods on either side. We hadn't passed another vehicle in over an hour, and dusk was creeping in, stretching eerie shadows over the asphalt. Jessica's phone GPS flickered out repeatedly, dropping connection and fraying her nerves. Still, we stuck to our path. Backtracking would have tacked on way too much time. By about 7 p.m., we spotted a modest pull-off amid the trees and decided to stop, needing to shake out our legs and grab a bite from our snacks. Towering pines enclosed the spot with a weathered picnic bench that screamed long abandonment. We eased the car to a halt, stepped out, and hauled out the cooler. The scent of resin and moist soil hung in the air, broken only by distant bird calls and whispering foliage in the wind. It was serene, suspiciously so, our cue to stay alert if we'd recognized it. Barely 10 minutes in, Tara gestured toward the woodland edge, whispering that something lurked, eyeing us. We scanned the area she indicated, but the gloom and underbrush concealed everything at first glance. Then it caught my eye. A silhouette amid the trunks, half veiled in darkness. Towering at perhaps 6 or 7 feet, it mimicked a human in ragged attire, face obscured by what seemed like a mask. But focusing harder, I saw the truth. It wasn't fabric or disguise. A deer's skull perched atop a form that echoed humanity. Speech died in our throats as we gawked. The shape remained statue still, silent, simply observing. Marcus forced a chuckle, claiming it was likely a prankster in disguise spooking travelers, though his trembling tone betrayed his fear, matching ours. Jessica urged us to bolt for the car, and we nodded frantically, scrambling to gather our gear. That's when the entity stirred, advancing deliberately from the murk into the open space. Up close, the horror chilled me to the core. No costume hid that antlered cranium. It merged seamlessly into the frame below. A man-like chest sprouted coarse, tangled fur, while spindly limbs stretched out, tipped with claw-like digits on what passed for hands. The lower body warped unnaturally, knees reversing like an animal's, cloven feet scraping the ground. This abomination bridged species in a way that defied nature itself. Screams erupted. We all lost it, bolting chaotically for the vehicle without knowing who started the panic. My fingers trembled on the door latch, slipping in terror. Jessica had jammed herself into the front, fumbling the keys toward the starter. Marcus and Tara dove into the back, yanking doors closed and hitting the locks. The beast quickened its pace, hooves scraping rhythmically on the stones, its rasps echoing like a guttural snarl. At last, the engine roared to life under Jessica's frantic twist, and she floored the accelerator. Wheels churned briefly in the dirt before gripping, launching us from the site in a spray of pebbles and earth. Twisting to glance behind, I saw it rooted in the center of the glade, tracking our retreat. The skull-crowned head cocked curiously, and I'll swear on anything that a limb lifted in a mocking farewell. That grotesque visage, locked on us in flight, seared itself indelibly in my mind. For the following hour, the car stayed deathly quiet. No one dared utter a syllable, each of us reeling from the nightmare. Once we hit civilization, Jessica veered into a service station lot, and we tumbled out. Tears streamed down Tara's face. Marcus appeared on the verge of vomiting. Jessica froze by the bumper, gazing at our escape as if stunned we'd survived. I recommended contacting the authorities, but how would we explain it? Claiming we'd spotted a half-human deer creature in the forest? They'd assume we were high or seeking publicity. So we headed into the nearby gas station to grab water and some munchies. The clerk, a lady in her 60s or so, eyed us suspiciously, as if she sensed trouble. I inquired about any odd tales from the route we'd taken, and her stare sent chills down my spine. She mentioned that folks had reported eerie presences in those trees for generations, beings that didn't fit in this world. We were fortunate to escape, she warned, and better stay away for good. She offered no further info, and we didn't press. We simply settled the bill and drove off. The remaining trip to the festival felt fraught with unease. We stuck to the interstate this time, steering clear of secondary paths. Conversation avoided the incident entirely, like a silent pact that ignoring it might make it less tangible. Yet it was undeniably true. I was certain of that. The image lingered, its eerie movements, the way it fixed its gaze on us. No disguise, no joke, no mirage, just an entity from beyond our reality. At the event, we attempted to enjoy ourselves and push the memory aside. But I couldn't dispel the sensation of being observed, of being permitted to depart. That being could have overtaken us easily. It outpaced and overpowered us, yet chose mercy. Was it merely playing games, or did some deeper motive lurk? Post-festival, life resumed its separate paths for us. Jessica switched colleges that fall, and we've lost touch. Tara and Marcus remain close, but that episode stays off limits in chats. It's as if it vanished from existence, though I suspect it haunts their thoughts like mine. I've searched online for clues about our sighting, uncovering a handful of comparable accounts. They're dubbed deer men or wendigos in some native lore, hybrids of man and beast. Still, the details don't align perfectly with our vision. Ours felt distinct, unparalleled. Reports from West Virginia and broader Appalachian regions echo similar encounters, figures blending human and wildlife traits. Theories range from echoes of ancient ceremonies, summoned entities that lingered, to elusive cryptids, species concealed in the hills for ages. Truth eludes me. What lingers is the certainty of its existence, prowling those wilds still. Nowadays, I bypass West Virginia routes altogether. No detours through countryside lanes for me. I cling to well-lit interstates and bustling thoroughfares, amid crowds and urban glow, aware of the lurkers in the underbrush, the silent observers, and determined to evade another glimpse. The true horror lies in the unknown intent. Mere intrigue, predatory intent, or an impulse beyond our grasp. It plagues my evenings, stalling sleep with visions of that skeletal deer head. Vacant orbits boring into me. The rhythmic clatter of hooves on stone echoes in my ears. The raw dread returns, that instant of awareness. We weren't solitary. An impossible presence tracked us. How many others have crossed its path? Fellow travelers through those thickets facing the identical horror. Do they share our reticence, or did some vanish into the gloom? If you're navigating West Virginia's secluded trails and notice a silhouette amid the foliage, an anomaly that defies nature, accelerate past. Resist the pull to explore. Certain enigmas defy explanation. Others demand only dread, and the deer man embodies that. Indelibly etched, its piercing stare, the bizarre lurch as it advanced. The overwhelming fear that surged when comprehension dawned. Those woods are off limits forever. That abomination endures, biding time. May no one else endure our ordeal. To the deer man haunting West Virginia's forests, may our trails diverge eternally. About 6 years back, while assisting my uncle with restoring a vintage farmhouse he'd acquired in the Pennsylvania countryside, an unsettling incident unfolded. He'd long dabbled in property flips, snapping up aged structures, refurbishing them, and turning a tidy sum on resale. This one dated to the late 19th century and had sat vacant for over 20 years. The initial snapshots he shared with me struck me as quaint in a weathered, neglected sort of charm. Little did I know the horrors awaiting us at that place. Situated roughly 30 miles beyond Pittsburgh, the old farmhouse sat amid endless fields and woods, with the closest house nearly a mile off and a rutted dirt track that was hardly drivable. Pulling up there in early June, it appeared far more dilapidated up close than the images suggested. The roof dipped low, flakes of paint curled away from the siding, and every window was either shattered or sealed with plywood. Still, my uncle remained upbeat, insisting the structure had solid potential and simply required care and effort. I was 19 then, scraping together funds for school, so his proposal to hire me for the fix-up work was a no-brainer. I seized it immediately. Those opening days involved tackling the ground level, hauling away years of accumulated junk and worn-out furnishings. The former residents had abandoned it all: musty sofas, shattered crockery, stacks of newsprint dating to the 1970s. It was revolting, yet doable. My uncle labored right beside me, and we advanced steadily. Come the third day, we'd emptied most of the main area, prepping it for fixes. That's when he suggested I head to the cellar to examine the base for fissures and moisture intrusion. I wasn't eager to venture below. The space reeked of mildew and rot, shrouded in gloom and moisture, yet I relented. He equipped me with a robust torch and a pad for jotting observations. The wooden steps groaned underfoot, so I proceeded cautiously, probing each one on the way down. At the foot, I swept the beam around. It was raw and incomplete, with earthen ground and rough stone walls, ancient timber struts bracing the overhead, and the atmosphere heavy with humidity. It evoked a journey into the past. I began assessing the walls, recording splits and spots where dampness had obviously infiltrated across the decades. About 10 minutes in, a faint noise stirred behind me, a gentle scrape, like cloth scraping over soil. I pivoted, directing the light that way, but nothing appeared. I chalked it up to a mouse, or perhaps a wandering feline slipped in via some gap. Vintage homes teemed with pests, after all. Shaking it off, I resumed my task. Soon enough, the noise returned, more distinct now, like measured paces crossing the floor below. I halted, shouted up to see if my uncle had followed, but silence answered. Heart pounding harder, I paused to listen. The steps ceased, and quiet reclaimed the air. Drawing a steadying breath, I dismissed it as nerves, probably the building shifting or drafts whistling oddly through the fractured panes above. As I swung toward the staircase to leave, there it was. In the distant corner, half veiled by darkness, loomed a shape. Towering, unnaturally so. Easily 7 feet high, with a gaunt, stretched frame that seemed almost bone-like. Its limbs dangled to knee level, fingers elongated and spindly, fidgeting faintly. Yet the head chilled me deepest. No features at all. Instead of gaze, nostrils, or lips, only sleek blank flesh that gleamed darkly in the faint glow. I froze in place, beam fixed upon it. The form remained still, utterly soundless, simply present, as if observing me. Despite lacking eyes, a primal urge surged through me to flee, but my limbs locked, terror pinning me down. Then it advanced, lurching in erratic, puppetish motions, each footfall a muted thud against the ground. That's when panic unleashed my cry, a guttural, instinctive wail of dread. I fled, scrambling up the stairs in leaps, heedless of stumbles. Behind, its tread accelerated, ragged, moist breathing reverberating in pursuit. I hit the kitchen door at the summit, shoving it closed and securing the latch. Leaning against it, I heaved for breath, limbs quivering uncontrollably. My uncle rushed in from elsewhere, demanding to know what happened. I stammered out the encounter, but it tumbled forth in a frantic mess. He stared at me as if I'd snapped, suggesting it was merely a trick of light fueling my fancy. Deep down, though, I recognized the truth. That presence was no illusion. It lurked in the basement below, inching closer to where I stood. My uncle urged me to step outside for a breather and compose myself. Yet I flat out refused to descend those stairs again. I informed him I was calling it quits for the day, and if he insisted on examining the foundation, he'd handle it alone. With a heavy sigh, he agreed to investigate. From the kitchen, I observed him snatch the flashlight and venture downward. I nearly called out to halt him, to warn him away from that place, but I held my tongue. Deep down, I wondered if I'd only conjured it in my mind, if my uncle's words rang true and I'd simply spooked myself. He spent roughly 15 minutes below, and, upon returning, his complexion had drained of color. At first he stayed silent, merely securing the basement door before approaching the sink for a drink of water. When I pressed him on whether he'd spotted anything, he denied it, with a shake of his head, though the deception was obvious. His gaze betrayed a mix of dread and bewilderment he couldn't quite conceal. He declared we were wrapping up for now and would resume the work tomorrow. But I sensed the truth. We had no intention of returning. Clearly, he'd glimpsed whatever it was that had terrified me so profoundly. The ride home passed in utter silence. My uncle fixed his stare on the road ahead, knuckles white on the wheel. After dropping me at my place, he passed me an envelope of payment and expressed thanks for my efforts, adding that my services wouldn't be required further. I inquired about his plans for completing the remodel, and he replied uncertainly, mentioning he needed time to mull it over. I never probed him on his discovery, and he never volunteered details, yet I understood. He'd faced the identical horror I'd encountered. Months afterward, word reached me that he'd offloaded the old farmhouse. No updates, no improvements, just sold in its current state to new buyers. I pondered whether he'd disclosed the basement's secret or buried it entirely. I truly hope he disclosed it, hope he alerted them. Because that entity, whatever form it took, lingers in the gloom, poised for the next visitor. I've dug into the farmhouse's past, but details are scarce. Ownership shifted frequently across the years, with residents departing swiftly each time. A handful of archived news clippings from the region alluded to odd happenings and baffling vanishings, yet nothing solid emerged. Forum users speculate that such aged rural homes might overlie indigenous burial sites or locales of past tragedies. Some posit that specific spots draw in malevolent forces, turning into beacons for sinister presences. I'm unsure what holds water. What I do know is that a presence inhabited that basement, one that defies nature, and it endures, lurking for whoever next braves those steps. The memory haunts me at times, particularly in my own cellar while sorting laundry or rummaging through boxes. I recall that blank visage, the elongated, spasming digits, the eerie, jerky approach it made. It leaves me questioning how many attics, how many weathered dwellings harbor such creatures, skulking in obscurity, biding their time. Should you enter a neglected structure, one long left to ruin, tread warily in the lower levels. Heed your gut feelings. If unease settles in, if the atmosphere thickens, if unfamiliar noises echo, flee immediately. Don't linger to identify the source. Don't dismiss it as fancy or nerves, for the shadows sometimes conceal genuine threats, observing our every move. Even now, I avoid uncompleted basements entirely. I steer clear of restoring vintage properties. The recollection of that abomination remains stark, undeniable. I can still picture it poised in the shadows, still hear the scrape of its steps across the earthen ground, still sense the panic surging as it advanced. It wasn't mortal, nor benevolent. One certainty lingers. I'll never erase the image of that indistinct silhouette in the basement, eyeing me from a featureless head. And no sum could lure me back to that property. Certain sites aren't for revival. They're destined to rot in isolation, overlooked and forsaken. That farmhouse qualifies. May whatever dwells below remain confined eternally. This incident unfolded 3 years back on a planned, solitary drive across the Arizona desert. Fresh out of college, I craved an escapade before diving into my initial career role. I've long been captivated by the desert's immense void, its raw allure, and the boundless heavens above. I yearned to immerse myself in it after dark, gazing at unspoiled stars, embracing solitude in its purest form. My dream came true, though far from how I'd envisioned it. I mapped out my path meticulously, heading from Phoenix into the isolated stretches of southern Arizona. Equipped with camping supplies, ample water, and a precise chart, I aimed to locate a hidden site away from the primary road, pitch my shelter, and pass the evening beneath the cosmos. I'd studied up thoroughly and grasped the essentials of desert outings: remain hydrated, beware of rattlesnakes, and inform a contact of your whereabouts. I'd messaged my roommate with my rough position right before signal vanished, leaving me feeling mostly secure. By 7 p.m., I discovered the ideal location. Roughly a mile from Highway 10, reachable via a dusty track that seemed untouched for months. The terrain lay flat and expansive, dotted with sparse bushes and the odd Joshua tree. As the sun dipped low, it brushed the horizon with hues of orange and violet, while the air began to cool. I pulled over my vehicle, stepped out, and paused to absorb the scene. Silence enveloped everything, broken only by the soft sigh of breeze over the dunes. It struck me as serene, nearly holy. I assembled my tent swiftly, eager to finish before night fully descended. Gathering dry twigs, I kindled a modest blaze, prepared a basic meal of canned broth and biscuits, and lingered there as the night sky unveiled its wonders. The stars dazzled beyond anything I'd witnessed, with the Milky Way flowing like a luminous stream overhead and faint satellites tracing paths through the void. I sensed my own insignificance in the most profound sense, linked to a greater expanse. At around 10 o'clock, I slipped into my tent, sealed my bag, and eased toward slumber. I'm not sure what jolted me alert. In an instant, sleep fled, replaced by a racing pulse. Glancing at my phone, I noted it was just past 2 a.m. I remained still in the pitch black, straining to listen. Initially, nothing seemed amiss. Just the wind's murmur and the dying embers' subtle pops from my fire. Yet soon, another sensation emerged. An odor. Subtle at first, it intensified rapidly. It carried the stench of decayed flesh, blended with a sharp, artificial tang that stung my eyes and churned my gut. Propping up in my bag, I tried to pinpoint its source. That's when the footfalls reached me. They moved with sluggish intent, grinding over the sand and pebbles beyond my shelter. My initial assumption was a coyote or javelina, drawn by my meal's aroma, nosing into camp. But these steps felt weightier, more purposeful. No wild creature's gait. They evoked a bipedal form, prowling my tense edge. I froze, breath caught, terror rooting me in place. The pacing persisted, tracing the outline in a deliberate loop. Now rasping breaths joined in, labored and uneven, as if exertion strained the source. The reek grew overpowering, forcing me to clamp a hand over my face to stifle nausea. Part of me itched to shout and demand identification, but an ancient caution held me back. Any noise might invite disaster. The steps halted directly at the entrance zipper. Through the thin material, a silhouette loomed, elongated and stooped, edged by moonlight's dim sheen. It lingered motionless, that moist, gurgling respiration echoing. Then came a push against the wall, the nylon yielding inward under unseen force. I recoiled frantically, jamming against the opposite side. The force eased, and the outline shifted away. Trembling uncontrollably in the gloom, I tracked the sounds as they circled to the flank. Scratching followed. Slow, intentional rasps along the cloth, as if talons probed for weakness, gauging if it would rip. With shaky fingers, I snatched my light and flicked it on, directing the beam at the assaulted panel. It lit the surface, revealing elongated, slender digits' shadows gliding over it. That sealed my resolve to flee. No way could I endure inside any longer. The thing outside sought entry, and delay meant surrender. I eased free of the bag without a rustle, clutched my keys and beam, and crept to the exit. My strategy was straightforward. Undo the flap, sprint to the car, and speed off into the night. It wasn't much of a strategy, but it was all I could come up with. I drew in a steadying breath and pulled down the tent's zipper. In the quiet void of the desert night, that noise echoed like thunder. Directing my flashlight outward, I scanned the beam over the campground. Nothing caught my eye initially. The campfire had died to embers, leaving everything shrouded in shadow save for the glow from my light. Then, there it was, positioned roughly 20 feet off, right on the fringe of illumination. The figure had a human shape, but everything about it felt off-kilter. Towering and slender, perhaps 7 feet high, its frame was sheathed in shadowy, tough hide that resembled scales. The arms dangled well below knee level, unnaturally elongated, while the legs twisted at bizarre joints. Yet, it was the visage that rooted me in place. Nearly bony, with hollow sockets that caught and mirrored the flashlight's gleam. The maw gaped wide, lined with irregular fangs, and I watched its torso rise and fall with ragged breaths. Our gazes locked for what dragged on forever. Suddenly it stretched its jaws further and unleashed a noise etched into my soul, a piercing wail fused with a deep rumble, shrill yet throaty. The vibration coursed through me, unleashing a surge of ancient dread. No time for thought. I simply fled. Bursting from the tent, I dashed to my vehicle, the light jittering erratically in my grip. Footfalls thumped behind me on the dunes, gaining ground fast. At the car, my trembling fingers dropped the keys as I struggled with them. Scooping them up, I glanced over my shoulder. It loomed just 10 feet distant. Jaws parted, that horrific racket still echoing from its gullet. Snatching the keys, I unlocked the door and dove behind the wheel. I shut it tight, engaged the locks, and twisted the ignition. The motor roared to life immediately. Bless it. And I shifted into reverse. The entity blocked the path ahead, lit starkly by the beams. For the first time, I took in its full horror, an indelible scar on my mind. The hide was shadowy and weathered, etched with markings like old wounds. Eyes like endless black pits, devoid of sclera or iris. And those talons at the ends of its digits, long hooked blades that could shred steel. No pause to guess its next move. I reversed hard, whipping the car about. Then I punched the accelerator. Racing over the barren terrain toward the gravel track, I ignored the jolts from stones and ruts. Escape was all that mattered. Hitting the asphalt road, I kept going without halting, covering nearly 50 miles until a service station felt secure. There in the lot, engine idling and doors secured, my limbs quivered, drenched in perspiration even in the chill breeze. The tent and supplies, abandoned without regret. Distance from that spot was my sole priority. As dawn broke, I pressed on to Phoenix. Reporting to authorities crossed my mind. What could I say? An assault by a mythical desert beast? They'd dismiss me as deranged or high. So I stayed silent, at least initially. Months passed before I mustered the nerve to share. I stumbled on a web community for cryptid reports and odd incidents, submitting my account incognito. Shockingly, replies poured in from folks with parallel ordeals in Arizona's wastes. Descriptions aligned with my nightmare. Some noted bizarre noises and odors after dark. One even referenced zones locals from Native American groups deemed taboo, haunted by malevolent presences no one should disturb. I've attempted to explain it away. Perhaps a cougar or grizzly warped by gloom and panic. Or maybe delusion from thirst or sunstroke. But deep down, I recognize the truth. That entity existed. It possessed cunning. It pursued me. And somewhere in Arizona's endless expanse, it lurks, poised for the solitary camper beneath the night sky. Even now, desert camping is off limits for me. Night drives through isolated stretches? Never. Gazing at images of Arizona's tranquil sands under constellations, I recall the unseen horrors in the shadows, concealed amid the desolation, ever vigilant. The wilderness holds no vacancy, no tranquility. Unknown entities dwell there, defying logic, yet undeniably present. Should you solo camp in seclusion and stir to an odd scent or steps near your shelter, resist the urge to peek. Shun attempts to comprehend or confront. Simply bolt. Hop into your vehicle and speed off without looking back, because certain encounters are best avoided altogether. There are entities that lurk in the gaps beyond society, thriving in untamed regions where people seldom tread, and they have no interest in our presence. I'll never shake the image of that being silhouetted in my headlights, its dark gaze locked on me, jaws wide in a horrifying wail. No matter its origin, it didn't belong to our reality, or at least not the one we're familiar with. And I pray I never cross paths with it again. I'm Joshua, and what I'm sharing with you unfolded last year, though the nightmare persists to this day. Unlike the tales you've heard earlier this evening, my brush with the unknown didn't conclude once I fled the scene. The entity I met trailed me back to my life, and it refuses to depart. I can't fathom its intentions or find a way to banish it. I'm telling this in the desperate chance that someone listening has faced a parallel ordeal, perhaps offering insight to aid me as my choices dwindle and time slips away. It all began on a backpacking outing in Oregon's woodlands last October. I'd hit a low point, grappling with a recent split from my partner and mounting job pressures, craving an escape from it all. I opted for a path I'd navigated multiple times, a fairly challenging circuit that typically ran 4 hours. Situated in a state-managed woodland, roughly an hour from Portland, it wasn't the most secluded spot in Oregon's wilds, yet remote enough for stretches without spotting another soul. I pulled up to the starting point at about 9 a.m. The lot stood deserted, typical for a late autumn weekday. Skies were cloudy yet rain-free, with a crisp chill that felt invigorating. I traveled minimally, carrying only hydration, energy bites, and my cell. No intention of lingering beyond a short while. The initial stretch revived me just as I'd hoped. The route meandered amid thick woods, brushing by lichen-draped trunks and bracken, with fleeting views of a narrow brook shadowing the way. My boots crunching on the earth and avian calls from the treetops formed the sole backdrop. A serene, almost trance-like calm. Roughly 2 hours along, I paused by a modest brook. A level boulder served as an ideal perch, where I sipped from my bottle and munched a protein bar. The surrounding woods fell eerily silent, excessively so. The bird song had faded, and the typical scurry of critters in the foliage had halted. But it didn't alarm me initially. Woods can hush like that occasionally, it's normal. That's when rustling emerged from the shrubbery at my back. I spun to spot a shape roughly 30 yards off, obscured partly by a trunk. Initially, I figured it was a fellow trekker, but its posture struck me as unnatural. Motionless entirely, it simply loomed, fixed on me. I shouted to check if it needed help, yet silence answered. It remained observing. Discomfort crept in. I gathered my gear and pressed onward along the path. Glancing back as I went, I realized it had shifted position, now on the trail in my wake, nearer than moments ago. Details sharpened. Towering at perhaps 6.5 feet, slender with elongated arms dangling awkwardly, its flesh a sickly ashen hue, and a face devoid of traits. No eyes, nostrils, or lips, merely unbroken, vacant surface. I quickened my stride, then broke into a trot, then a full sprint. Each backward peak showed it gaining ground subtly. No frantic pursuit or dash. It merely ambled, sinking to my rhythm, holding that steady gap. It felt like a game, a deliberate reminder of its pursuit without lunging. I dashed on endlessly, it seemed, chest heaving, muscles screaming. Bursting into the lot at last, I wheezed desperately. Peering toward the trail's mouth, There it waited at the tree line, eyes on me. I dove into my car, secured the locks, and peeled out. Racing along the entry path, I scanned the mirror repeatedly, bracing for its form blocking the route, but nothing appeared. I believed I'd broken free. I assumed the ordeal had ended. That evening, clawing noises roused me at my window. My second-story apartment ruled out any beast. Rising, I parted the drapes, and there it was in the lot beneath, gazing upward. The identical forest specter, lanky, pallid, blank-faced. Our stares held for an endless beat, then it cocked its head curiously, as if appraising me. I drew the drapes shut and stepped back from the window, my pulse racing wildly. A few minutes passed before I mustered the nerve to peek out once more, but whatever it was had vanished. Sleep evaded me for the remainder of the night. Instead, I huddled on the sofa with every lamp blazing, flinching at the slightest creak or whisper. By dawn, I managed to rationalize it as a hallucination, blaming the exhaustion from the trek and mounting pressures on my frayed nerves. Yet that evening it reappeared, and the one following, then nightly thereafter, always lurking in the lot below, gaze fixed on my room. On some occasions it lingered for what felt like eternity. On others it faded quickly, only to return inevitably. I began recording its presence, snapping pictures and clips via my smartphone. Yet the silhouette refused to appear in any footage. The lens captured only deserted pavement, despite its unmistakable form right before my eyes. Desperate to validate my sanity, I shared the recordings with buddies, but they dismissed it as vacant space. Concern grew among them. They urged therapy, insisting the strain must be unraveling me. I quit sharing after that. Roughly 2 weeks in, the encounters intensified. No longer confined to the lot, it began manifesting elsewhere. While commuting to the office, I'd spot it roadside, tracking my vehicle as it drove by. In the supermarket, a peripheral view revealed it at aisle's end. Perpetually observing, relentlessly trailing. Paranoia gripped me. I felt on the brink of madness. What force could shadow me so omnipresently? Why was I alone in perceiving it? I exhausted every remedy that crossed my mind. A clergy member anointed my home at my plea, but the ritual proved futile. It materialized that very evening in its usual spot. Turning to an expert in the occult, she proposed it stemmed from a mental construct, a thought form or tulpa, born of intense fixation or dread. Acknowledging and dreading it, she explained, might empower it further. Her advice: dismiss it entirely, cease seeking it out, starve it of terror. I attempted this with all my resolve, truly I did, but ignoring a sentinel that never relents, forever vigilant? Impossible. In a bid for escape, I relocated to a new residence, hoping separation might sever the tie. It failed. On the inaugural night there, it loomed beyond my sleeping quarters unchanged. Fleeing across state lines crossed my thoughts, a fresh start in unfamiliar territory. Still, dread paralyzed me. The notion it might pursue regardless chilled my core. That no refuge existed, that pursuit was assured. The true horror lay in its inscrutable intent. It had never assaulted me, never breached the threshold, merely observed an unceasing vigil. Was this mercy or torment surpassing outright assault? At least aggression would clarify the threat. This perpetual scrutiny, the sense of pursuit every waking instant, shreds my psyche. I've delved into accounts of my woodland sighting that fateful day. Web searches point to a rake or pale crawler, yet those are portrayed as vicious predators. This one abstains from violence, content to stalk. Others posit a shadow figure or observer, beings that monitor without engagement, yet no tale aligns precisely with mine. I'm at a loss now. Trails are forsaken. Nocturnal outings ceased. Drapes remain drawn. Additional deadbolts secure every entry, pointless against its will if entry were sought. Lights burn through my restless nights, yielding scant repose. Fatigue haunts my days. I startle at phantoms, glance backward incessantly. Loved ones suspect a mental collapse, pushing for medical intervention and pills. Perhaps they're correct. Perhaps delusion claims me. But the visions are undeniable. The entity beyond the glass each dusk is no illusion. It's tangible, persisting in surveillance, biding time for unknown purpose. If you've endured akin torment, if you grasp its nature or a way to banish it, contact me. Urgency consumes me. This endless dread, insomnia, seclusion, it's eroding my essence. I'm hollow now, a weary specter braced for the inevitable, haunted by the presence trailed from Oregon's woods. I can't fathom your motive or why I was selected, but depart, I beg. Return to your origin and grant me solace. Yet I sense futility. Your watch endures, purpose elusive. One certainty, that path is forever abandoned. I'll never venture out on a trail by myself again, and I'll always remember the eerie glimpse of that blank, expressionless face gazing at me through the trees. How it trailed me all the way back to my place. How it's now woven into every corner of my existence. Should you come across anything unnatural lurking in the wilderness, something observing you with a cunning that's deeply unsettling, stay clear of it. Pretend it isn't there. Above all, make sure it doesn't shadow you back. Once it latches on, it might stick around forever. I'm clueless about how this tale concludes. I'm not even sure if it ever will. What I do know is that this evening, like all the nights over the last year, it'll be right there beyond my window, staring in. While I'm huddled indoors, gripped by fear and isolation, questioning if this horror will ever truly cease.